So I don't have an intro for this yet, and hopefully that's not my intro because I'm not gonna start every single time with an intro. But I want to have a conversation, or at least start a conversation with different Overwatch players, different dedicated Overwatch players that I know, and have been around with the community for a while, and potentially not even been around with the community. Hopefully, maybe we can get some kind of interview stuff going with some other people, or we'll see if we can make this work as a thing. Um, but I've definitely noticed that there's a lot of confusion with Overwatch 2, and there's a lot of confusion too between the people that uh there's even a lot of confusion within the dedicated gaming community, because I think there's a few voices that are a little bit, or they're quite a bit louder than others, and they are correct in many of their assessments, which we can go into in a small bit. But I do believe a lot of us, I guess the average player, which is somewhat mostly the players, at least in my mind, that matter, do have opinions on how they think Overwatch 2 overall has been presented to us, and yeah. Anyways, I got nothing more to add to that, other than I do want to start up this conversation with Wildking, who of course I've known for quite a long time. How many years now, Wild? I like
At least 2 or 3 now.
exactly.
We've been
He's
playing together for a while.
one of the OG Scrub Club members, and has definitely become a significantly better player since the first time I met him. Has yeah, is almost I would say what, like almost 1,000 SR above me in some cases, which is definitely something I'll totally take, which is why I value his opinion so much, and I brought him on here today to give us his opinions about Overwatch 2. Before we go into anything in specific, is there something that you want to share about your opinions on Overwatch 2? Like, is there anything to you that stood out recently, other than, of course, the 5v5, that we can go over in a small bit here? But yeah, I'll let you take the stage.
First and foremost, I play support. I only play support. In Overwatch 2, I haven't even touched the other roles yet, so my my focus and where I climb the most is on my support, so that's the only thing I really care about going into the 5v5 setting and how that all works. The biggest thing I've probably seen with Overwatch 2 that has changed is the pacing of the game. The new push maps are amazingly built, and they have a lot of spots that they don't look like a choke point, but they are definitely built as choke points as soon as you learn how to abuse those corners and play in specific spots to stop the cart and all sorts of stuff like that. But the biggest thing I've probably seen, most of our generic maps are going to play pretty similar to what we're used to, but especially getting into those push maps and some of the newer payloads that they've added, it really becomes a game of area control and positioning and then tempo. I think with the 5v5 setting, the tempo of the game has sped up.
Okay, well, definitely one of the concerns too that I've been hearing, especially from the higher elos, is that the healers or the supports. So, I know healer is kind of a derogatory term in a sense now, but the supports, they get jumped a lot easier, and so people like there's kind of this there's a conflict between, like, is Ana good to play, right? Because she can get jumped a lot, but she also has like high impact in the fight in terms of aggression, right? Or are characters like Moira taking over the heroes that you have to play when you're playing? Like, I know that's kind of like a general statement, but is that something that you're feeling too, where you're getting jumped a lot more and you're being forced to play more survivable heroes, or are you kind of just knocking about as usual? I know Wild plays a ton of Brig, but also he plays every other support at a fairly
Yeah,
high elo in general. But yeah, sorry, go.
so I've done a couple scrims and pugs with higher elo players where it was a lot more structured. I think in quick play right now specifically, yeah, we're looking at those easy, good survivability, your Moira, Mercy, even Baptiste with his immortality field. I've seen a lot of that because they can survive the fight. but getting into structured play and higher ranks, I still see a lot of Ana. See a bit of Zen, a lot of Brig, a lot of Lucio, and a bit of Mercy coming in and out. But those seem to be the core supports that I'm actively seeing the most out of when we get into the structured stuff. So think about going into comp games, whatever rank you're at, that's higher the rank, the more skill there is, the more complex the support lineup can be.
Of course. So I think the big question is, or at least this is one thing that people are like asking when they jump into Overwatch 2. It's like what is so different about that playstyle in comparison to the original Overwatch? Like, are you gonna feel? You say once you get to a higher elo, or at least sorry, in not a higher elo because there's no elo system right now. But when you get into more structured games, are you feeling the same kind of safety that you did before, or are you feeling like you have to spend a lot more time like managing your backline and getting jumped? Because of course, one less tank does mean one less thing potentially jumping you.
Yeah, I've definitely felt a lot more of the support lineup has to fend for themselves. When DPS are on flanks and your tank is face to face with their tank, your support lineup really has to hold down the fort and keep it between themselves, and they've given a couple buffs here and there for damage and burst damage to actually burn people down quick. So as long as your support duo is a competent player, even in the quick play where I'm getting dove pretty hard continuously, if I just have another support that's with me, 9 times out of 10 we walk away from that fight with someone dead, and that's not on our team. So I think they've definitely gotten beefier as far as actually being able to put out damage.
Well, do you think that playstyle is so fundamental, well, so fundamentally different in Overwatch 2 that like it would be worth coming back to if you played Overwatch casually for a while, but still really interested in playing competitive? Because people felt like before it was, and this is one of the reasons why people left. It's kind of the same chaotic thing over and over again. Are you feeling at support you have more control over the fight? Like it feels it's somewhat, at least from my end, playing a bunch of support. I'm kind of trying to play all roles here. Is that I have more individual impact, but when I'm getting jumped, if I don't have the like if I don't have somebody else there with me, or if I've positioned myself in a strong spot, I'm gonna get jumped more than of course the original Overwatch. Like I imagine that's kind of the same feeling overall. But why is that so different? That's the big question here.
I, it's really not that different as far as getting jumped over and over, because the people that you're playing with in Overwatch 2 right now, they're looking for that spot where you're out of position and that's where they're jumping you. And you're getting punished for it. So you gotta, without having a second tank that can continuously peel for your supports, it's definitely a lot safer play style. You want to really rely on your ults to do big contributions to the fight, and using your abilities. First one that comes to mind would be an anti-nade from Ana. Being able to shut down their heals, using those abilities to keep your team going through fights. That's really where supports come in now.
It
I
definitely
don't.
feels more like if you're trying to win games, that seems to be needed a lot more nowadays, right? Like in Overwatch 2, you could spend a lot more time, I guess, supporting, healing, especially with that second tank to kind of just sustain the fight for a little bit longer and give you more space. But now, if you're trying to squeeze out every single win, you are gonna have to be more aggressive.
Yeah, 100%. I've most of my games I'm out damaging one of the DPS, I'm out healing all of the supports in the game. You want to be able to get that damage in. Even on characters like Ana, where traditionally you're thinking, I'm just gonna sit behind my Reinhardt and shoot him in the back the entire time. And it works in Overwatch 1. If you can just keep your tanks alive longer than they can keep theirs alive, you can win fight after fight off of that. But Overwatch 2, you definitely need to start thinking about doing damage and doing damage at the right times. The supports are really good at cleaning up kills and have that quick burst, or the Ana shot it's a tick damage, so it goes a little over time. Those things are really starting to show themselves a lot more for Overwatch 2.
Yeah, I think a good reference is actually like Counter-Strike, where the support in that game is not, there's no healing, right? So the support that you're adding to your team. So if you're playing a role, you're buying items that are more supporty. They're generally going to be things like smoke grenades and flash grenades. They're going to be like stuff that pushes into an area, and it seems to us, at least from a competitive perspective, that they balance the game in a way that is more aggressive or requires more aggression, as opposed to making it more, I guess, MMO-y, where you are trying to sustain yourself through these large fights and these large, long, sustained battles. I do want to take us in a little bit of a different direction here. Uh, what do you think of the new engine, or the new, I guess, feel of Overwatch? Of course, they've rehauled the looks, the lighting engine. They've rehauled, I guess, the way everything runs. But how does that feel from a competitive perspective? Especially too, since I'll point out I'm having a little bit of issue with performance, which I imagine will get better upon release, because performance is kind of just thrown. I know how performance is just slapped together originally to get the content out there. But what do you think, Wild? Especially since you got a brand new machine and you should be running this hopefully at frame rates
I am at 300 frames nonstop.
nonstop. Wow.
It the new engine, it feels really good. It sounds really good. The biggest thing that I really like about it is when you get shot, your screen moves. So you know you got shot. You know the direction based off of how your screen moves. So definitely it's a lot faster paced game, so there's a lot going on in keeping track of it. But they updated sounds, so you can distinctly tell your McCree from your Ashe from your Widow. Pharah's rockets sound really good. I know the biggest change I've noticed is Zen with his orbs. They feel very fluid and very precise. I think as far as really the engine is just an update to keep up with the times and what games are coming out now, and it feels amazing. Comparing that to other games, closest thing you could probably get to would be Valorant and CS:GO. The engine feels amazing compared to them. And
And the
like
art
you said,
style. So I've noticed too. Just the art style is a little more. It seems sharper. I will point out, and we can talk about this in a second, that the new maps do feel a little bit noisy, in my opinion. Maybe there's a little bit much going on, and if you don't know the map in and out, then it's really hard to learn. Whereas a lot of original Overwatch maps are very straightforward. Um, but sorry, did take it off a little bit here, but like, do you think the new map structure, like actually the changes to do anything to the game, or like any of the visuals or anything do anything to the game that specifically stand out? You did mention like sound is one big thing. Which something that I didn't think about too much was the what is it called? It's like hit punch or something like that. That where your screen gets knocked around as you get hit. That seems really noticeable. Is there anything to you that like visually seems, is it worth the kind of visual upgrade? Because in some senses I feel it's a little bit too noisy. But what are your thoughts on that?
some of the new maps definitely are. I think that'll just come with time. Even getting into Overwatch originally, a lot of those maps, there's a lot of back alleys and flank routes, and that's how they're designed. And it just took time for us to get to know them and understand them better. And every once in a while, you still find new things. So, oh, you can wall ride on Lucio outside of the map here to get to a whole nother area. But I think just over time, we'll get used to the maps. I don't think that'll be a major thing. As far as art style, I haven't noticed too much. I don't. I play on low graphics. I'm trying to pump everything out I can to be the best player I can. So I
there's a
don't
sense
put
of
much in
mastery.
graphics.
So there's a sense of
Hmm.
mastery that you're saying to the maps that will come with time, and I fully agree. Like, I have noticed they are a little bit weird in comparison to other FPSs, and potentially there may be some critiques in the future that will come out that, like, if you stand in certain spots, and I'll just point this out, there's so many angles that the enemy can come out of that at some point it does feel a little bit random, even if you've like guaranteed that the two players are pretty good at it. Like, I'm watching a little bit of a bit of pro play, I guess. Sorry, more streamers, more high, grandmaster streamers and whatnot. And it does feel like sometimes they do get caught out in spaces where it's like, well, there's no way you could have guessed them coming from that angle. But is that something you see as a danger? I haven't seen anybody talk about it, so maybe that's just something that is a flag for me. But again, I do agree with you on the over time people will master it.
I've played a couple games with streamers. I had one 2 days ago with Emong and Seagull. We were up against them, and I was playing with some buddies, and we did win the game, but it was one of the push maps, and those two were both on flanks the entire time. They kept popping out of different windows.
Yep.
And pressuring us, and I think that just loops back to what I was saying originally, where it's all about area control. If you can lock down an area, you can really fight your way through about anything. If your team is playing together, it's gonna come down to your DPS outflanking theirs, your supports out damaging their supports, out healing, using abilities better, tanks winning the duel. As soon as your tank wins that duel, you won the fight. If your tank can just walk on them, it's pretty easy. But I think the new maps they're a little tricky. There's a lot of weird passageways. I'm definitely thinking of the map on Rome with the Colosseum. There's a lot of indoors, and there's a courtyard that most people haven't even figured out exists.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff like that, and
But nothing stands out like the Eichenwald like choke. Remember that original choke?
oh yeah. Um, yes and no. I'm thinking of what's the map? I need to go look. There's one map in particular that is can't remember which one it is. It's on the middle. There's a walkway across, and you got the buses. It's one of the
Oh.
push maps.
Oh, I'm so bad. Yes, yes, I know what you mean.
Yeah. That map in particular, I've noticed at the end of each of the straightaways, there's a little room that's a little higher up, and from that room you can contest the push point. So it becomes a choke. It's not a choke in your traditional sense like Eichenwald, but if you have a Reinhardt that can sit there with a shield up, you can contest that forever. So you're able to force choke points into different spots. And I think as time goes on, we'll figure that out more and know how to counter it better. But
Right,
I've been
right now it
I've been
feels hard,
abusing
right?
it.
Yeah, it
I've been
feels.
abusing it, and like playing against pro players, I didn't let them push it past where I was holding.
It feels a little bit. Yeah, a little bit too high value for. But of course, with time, we'll have to see. I think the developers were confident with us, like that we'd figure out the Eichenwald one. But I over time, I think people, of course, just forced them to add in the extra one. I don't know. I don't even know if it changed up the engages that much. So we will have to see in time. Do you think though that these changes are worth calling it Overwatch 2, or at least with the potential that they've said they're going to have more heroes in the future? Like with what we have so far, obviously it's just going to be more of the same stuff. Like, is that enough to call it Overwatch 2?
I don't think the PvP alone is going to be enough to call it Overwatch 2. The 5v5 is a big change that they could never do in the original Overwatch. But Overwatch 2 is the bundle of PvP with the PvE and that whole system, which we haven't even gotten to take a look at yet. And I'm really excited for it personally, to see what that's going to be like and how those upgrades are going to work. I've done a lot of that in the past with TF2 with their MVM mode, which is the PvE, and I've enjoyed it immensely. So I think if you look at PvP alone, it's not enough, but that's not what they're building here.
So you're confident that the PvE will be enough to call it Overwatch 2. I believe so too. There's a little bit of a misconception, especially if you haven't seen the Donkey video yet. Go take a look. It is absolutely hilarious and somewhat true that it is Overwatch 1.1. But I think that's the purpose of the beta too. That like the beta is literally Overwatch 1.1. Would that be a correct assessment?
Oh, 100%. I think people are putting way too much into it that this is the the finished game that they're playing. And we've already seen them do patches on this game and rework stuff after they now have people playtesting at all elos, and they can see where you're playing, how you're playing, what your stats are. I think we're going to see a lot more changes coming to rebalance and change stuff up to get it to what the developers are really viewing as Overwatch 2, and that's going to be what we get to play in the end.
Okay, okay. I'm fairly confident. I do think they've made some really bad choices so far in how they've like released it or how they've like portrayed Overwatch 2 to the community. But I am on the same page as you that things will hopefully be significantly better and include a lot more content. I know, and I can't give the exact name or position. I know that one of the people that worked in Fortnite is now actually the head of content, I think, in Overwatch or for Overwatch 2. So hopefully they're building pipelines that allow them to build content alongside the competitive, where the I guess PvE or even potentially like what's been mentioned. I'm pretty sure Samito mentioned this quite a few times, having a Overwatch an Overwatch battle royale. Something like that would be I think would be fun alongside Overwatch competitive, and would actually enable Overwatch 2 competitive to be something that's supported and does nothing but grow in the future. The big elephant in the room is the tab menu. Thoughts?
I got a couple gripes and a couple things I really like.
Okay.
My biggest gripe is that when you hit tab, you cannot see the percentage of alt. You
Yep.
just have a circle that slowly raises. So I think that's both good and bad. I think it's gonna build a lot more communication between teammates during the games, trying to combo your alts together. And stringing one alt off the next, think Nano Blade, you can nano a little early so that he can dash and get the blade. But I like it. I think one of the biggest gripes we've all had with the original Overwatch is we've never been able to see stats. You can't compare how well you're doing to what the enemy team is doing. And it really starts to show when you get into the numbers. Okay, who's carrying? Are your supports just completely outclassing theirs? does your tank have 1,000 less damage than theirs, or are your DPS insane and just hitting shot after shot? And you can see all of that. And I think really from a support mindset and being able to see the damage on the other team as well, with a little bit of math, because tanks now do different amounts of alt charge, you can track alts a lot easier. Being able to see they haven't done this alt in a while, he's up 3,000 damage from where he was, he's probably got his alt. So I think having that is really gonna put the good players above the bad players. I think being able to see that's gonna make that biggest difference.
I believe the transparency is definitely going to make the game a lot cleaner, I think. Even if they don't keep the entire menu for the full release of Overwatch, and that menu is just in the replay viewer, fingers crossed, I think that would be enough to at least give some information, or at least more transparency on what's happening within the fight. Because having it during the fight is really nice, and I think actually I believe they would have something close to what they have already, and hopefully there is some information about what the enemy team is doing, especially if you know all of your team. But still, giving us anything at all is actually just like the best feeling ever, I think, for a tab menu, even though it's kind of ugly in its current state.
I think it's also going to cut down on toxicity a lot.
Hopefully. Fingers
Having
crossed.
people that make one mistake the entire game and then get flamed for it. When you hit tab and that person is completely outclassing everyone else, they're not going to be able to do that anymore.
Exactly.
The numbers are there. You can't argue with it. But it's also going to make transparent when you have a thrower or you have a boosted account that's being played and they're 3,000 damage below where the rest of their team is.
Exactly.
And where they should be. So I think having that and being able to see what are you doing and is it effective is going to be a big difference going into team fights, and as a support knowing who to pocket, where your carry is, who do you want to give your ult to if you're Ana or Valking with Mercy. I think having those numbers is going to make a big difference there to really plan out what you want to do.
Well, I think the future of Overwatch looks pretty bright, even though Blizzard seems to make all the stupid mistakes you possibly can for a game that is just an absolute gift to the gaming community. Well, I think what we're going to do is we're going to wrap it up here. There's a lot more to talk about, and we'll definitely talk a lot more about it in the next upcoming weeks. Hopefully, Wild, if you want to do some more of these, because this is a lot of fun. We'll definitely go into a lot more talks, I think, that are getting avoided by some more proliferant, I guess, Overwatch content creators who focus more on high elo stuff. Again, I want to make sure that we're translating everything for the majority of the Overwatch community, because a lot of high elo content is very gated. It's hard to get into, especially when you don't fully understand what's going on. Now, we actually have Sunday Scrub Club Scraps coming up fairly soon. I'm going to be jumping into pre-fights here. So if anybody's watching and they want to join, we are going to be doing pre-fights, and then in about half an hour, we'll be starting up Scraps. So yeah, feel free to join me over in looking to play in the Overwatch section on the Discord. Other than that, thank you so much, Wild, for coming out. This is wonderful, fun talk. Again,
Thanks for having me.
Hope we have a lot more of these, and I will be cutting this up, throwing this up on YouTube. It will be on the Scrub Club Media channel. Same with Scraps, and for anybody, of course, we know so many people that are waiting for last week's Scraps. There is some issue with the video clips and audio synchronization and rendering. It will come out hopefully tonight when I re-render the whole thing, but we will get there. So yeah, Wild, I don't know if you're gonna join us, but I'm gonna I gotta find some way to just end it so I can have a cut at the end, but the cut is gonna be right here.